Alzheimer's disease doesn't just steal memories, it upends entire lives. It's a devastating disease that affects not only the diagnosed, but also the families who love and care for them. I'm going to be talking to other experts in the field and review how brain health strategies can dramatically reduce your risk. Even if you carry the genes, your future isn't set in stone. Real people are already rewriting their story and staying cognitively sharp thanks to the science of integrative medicine. Let's explore how. Alzheimer's disease is a formidable foe, often described as the most common cause of dementia. In the United States alone, it's estimated that over 6 million people are living with Alzheimer's, a number projected to nearly triple by 2050 due to the aging population. This progressive neurological disorder gradually erodes memory and cognitive function, profoundly affecting not just the individuals diagnosed, but also their families and caregivers.
And the end for my mom was she suffocated and on her own spit because she couldn't swallow anymore, and it took days, and it was literally torture to watch.
Alzheimer's doesn't just steal memories, it changes the fabric of relationships and everyday life.
I've actually told my kids I don't want them to waste their life like I saw my dad do sitting next to my mom day in and day out. I mean, he cared for her for 13 years, and it basically killed him.
But here's the good news. With our precision medicine approach, we can assess risk factors earlier than ever before. And when it comes to maintaining cognitive function, the earlier we intervene, the better. So what makes someone more likely to develop Alzheimer's? Genetics play a significant role, and one of the most studied genetic risk factors is the APOE gene.
You have 2 copies of APOE4, a set from your mom and a set from your dad.
This gene comes in several forms, or alleles, but the E4 variant of the APOE gene is particularly notorious.
And what does that mean exactly?
That means you have an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease.
Everyone has 2 copies of a given gene. If someone happens to have 1 copy of the E4 gene, their risk of Alzheimer's disease goes up by 2 to 3 times. If someone has 2 copies of the gene, their risk increases much more dramatically by 10 to 15 times. And so here's this one variable that we are beginning to understand as highly relevant for brain and cognitive health. And these are pretty common genes. So it's not that these are abnormal genes. These are genes that are frequently found in the general population. About 25% of people have 1 copy of this gene.
So that's significant because about 25% of the population has 2 to 3 times the risk of developing something like Alzheimer's disease.
Yes.
So what should someone do if they get tested and discover they have the E4 variant of the APOE gene? That's the million-dollar question.
There's emerging data that those people may respond better to a low carbohydrate diet. So more proteins, more fats, fewer refined carbohydrates, which is what we generally recommend. But in these instances, we may be even a bit more aggressive in how we're thinking about carbohydrate intake.
Think of it this way. APOE4 carriers are more prone to insulin resistance and metabolic issues, particularly when they consume a lot of refined carbohydrates. These issues can lead to increased inflammation and oxidative stress in the brain, which in themselves are risk factors for Alzheimer's and therefore may become a double whammy when one has the APOE4 gene variant. So when we find that someone has E4, we immediately implement a dietary approach that helps manage blood sugar, reduce inflammation, and protect brain health. Complementing this with targeted nutrients, such as omega-3 fatty acids, may further protect cognitive function.
With APOE4, the metabolism of a particular omega-3 fatty acid called DHA is somewhat impaired. And so DHA is an omega-3 fatty acid that is very important for brain health. So in that population, we sometimes think about getting even higher doses of DHA to support cognitive function. We also think about high quality fatty acids from things like olive oil, for example, from fatty fish.
And the idea would be if somebody is concerned or noticing changes and it turns out that they have a copy of the APOE4 gene, that some of these interventions will actually change their risk or delay the disease, or maybe both?
And there's some controversy about testing for APOE4 because people think of it as the Alzheimer's gene. But I think the other important piece to note is that just because you have APOE4 does not mean that you're destined to develop Alzheimer's disease.
But if you know you have that risk, at least you then can take some of the steps that might mitigate that risk. Another gene that comes into play is the MTHFR gene, which acts like a biochemical assistant during DNA methylation. Basically, it helps convert the B vitamin folate into a form our bodies can use. However, when there's an MTHFR gene mutation, this process is hindered, leading to a buildup of homocysteine. And high levels of homocysteine are associated with vitamin deficiencies, oxidative stress, and inflammation, key factors that spur the Alzheimer's disease process.
So if people have a variant in MTHFR, which again, it's quite common to have a variant, their ability to methylate may be impaired. And this is increasingly implicated in a number of chronic conditions. It's implicated in cardiovascular disease, it's implicated in diabetes, and I think most pertinently for us, it is associated with cognitive decline. They may need higher doses of these B vitamins because their body is less efficient at using the ones that they have. And so it may be more difficult for those patients to get enough of the B vitamins in a diet, unless they're being very careful and thoughtful about how they're getting them.
The last gene we'd like to introduce is the COMT or COMT gene.
Individuals with particular variations in COMT, which again are quite common, may have increased breakdown of neurotransmitters in the brain.
COMT plays a vital role in breaking down neurotransmitters like dopamine, which is important for memory, movement, and mood. When there's a variation in the COMT gene, it can lead to lower dopamine levels, which makes individuals more susceptible to memory issues and cognitive decline. When there are problematic COMT gene variations, the goal is to find ways to counter the vulnerability of lower dopamine production. For example, managing stress is critical when there is a COMT variant. Research shows that mindfulness meditation programs that are integral to integrative medicine can lower the stress hormone cortisol by around 30%, which can significantly help in maintaining healthy dopamine levels.
So now we have these three genes, APOE4, MTHFR, COMT, all of which can interact, all of which can be expressed in different ways. And if we go back to thinking about, okay, how do we approach someone with new onset cognitive decline? It becomes very valuable to have this information because it provides in some ways a blueprint for what you're working with.
Understanding the role of these genes in Alzheimer's is just one piece of the puzzle. A fascinating case from Dr. Handley revealed a patient with 2 copies of APOE4, giving him a 10 to 15 times higher risk of cognitive decline. Despite this, his brain stayed sharp, likely because of the proactive, health-promoting measures he took, such as regular exercise, and an anti-inflammatory diet, and effective stress management. This makes what was a dire genetic risk much more hopeful. It also is a direct counter to the old way of thinking that we are victims of our genes and there's nothing to do about it.
I think the moral of the story here is that APOE4, while important, it gets a lot of attention, is not the only thing. There are lots of variables that affect brain health. And again, if you look at people with dementia, only about 20% of cases are linked to APOE4. And so then you have this 80%, they don't have APOE4, but they have the family history of dementia. And so then the question becomes, what do you do for them? What do you do in those cases?
We can intervene on people, and the sooner we do it, we may be able to delay or prevent up to 40% of dementia. Once they have disease, we're too late. We need to intervene 20, 30, 10 years before with modifying approaches to reduce or prevent the risk of getting that dementia.
Number one, energy. That is sunlight turning into power inside living plants and then eating those motors the system. Nice at 20, completely crucial at 60. So what that does, that's a double result, because not only do you energize the system, but by using plant food, you then reset the microbiome. And the microbiome is the root of your body, and the microbiome has your future in its own hands, not your grandfather from the grave. The microbiome decides whether you live or die.
As technology advances, integrative medicine using a precision model can intervene before disease fully develops, significantly decreasing the devastating impact of cognitive decline. From the factors that cause inflammation and oxidative damage, such as genomics, diet, activity level, the microbiome, and stress, to the targeted interventions we've discussed that can give people that extra edge, there is now a hopefulness that just wasn't there before. Science continues to validate that a healthy lifestyle is the most powerful tool there is in protecting your brain. We are now beginning to understand how and why, which makes the prospect of aging vibrantly optimistic and exciting. Thank you for joining me on this journey. We've just scratched the surface of what's possible. With the right tools, the right insights, and a new approach to care, we can protect brain health and often change the story before it's written. I'm Dr. Dan Monti. Until next time, be well.